Good afternoon. Thank you guys for joining us today for Google Groups at NC State. My name is Louise Flynn. I'm a trainer with the Office of Information Technology, and I'm going to be your disembodied voice for the day. Also on this call is Katie McInerney. She's our training coordinator. She'll be moderating the call and keeping an eye on our Q&A as we go through the day. Just a little bit of housekeeping. We've got a Q&A document that's live during this event. You can see a link to it just underneath the video window. It's in the video description. Open that in a new window or tab and type out your questions, and we will answer on air. Keep in mind that there is a slight delay for these YouTube live events. It's generally 30 seconds to a minute. Generally not something you're going to see or notice a problem with, but sometimes it can get a little funky if you're typing a question and I'm answering your question as you're typing it. I haven't actually seen it yet. It's just that little bit of a delay, so bear with us if that happens. And there is an evaluation and presentation slides in the document as well. I will remind you at the end to fill out the evaluation because that is something that we really do use when we're looking at the type of content that we're providing to campus, what type of apps we're training on and the sort of questions that people have and the ways that we deliver that content, like these live online webinars or in-person training. And the presentation slides are also linked in there. If you've come to one of our trainings before, you've probably noticed that we like to do a lot of live demos and hands-on training. This class is not going to be that way, and it's because I want this to be useful for you later. So the presentation slides, as we'll go through it, are a lot of screenshots, and that way you'll be able to use it as a how-to kind of step-by-step guide when you're working on your Google Groups later. So a little less exciting during class, hopefully really useful to you later. So keep a copy of those presentation slides or save that link someplace so you'll have access to it later. So our agenda today, going to cover some general group info and then use cases for using groups and some specific settings. We're going to be diving into a lot of settings today. I've got a full agenda, but believe it or not, I am just pulling out the highlights and the stuff that people are using most here on campus. And talked about that Q&A document. Katie will stop me if there's a really pertinent question, but otherwise I'm going to try to hold a lot of them to the end, but type them whenever they come up. So I do want to note, Google just put out an announcement last week, just a couple days ago, that they're going to be making some changes in May to some settings. I've gone through the announcement. I linked it on here for you too, if you'd like to look at it later. I've gone through it, and I don't think it really affects anything that I'm talking about today, but just be mindful of that. If some of these screenshots, things change a little bit, we'll just have to kind of roll with it in May when that happens. So first, what is a group? Google defines it as a tool for group collaboration and communication, which is such a snooze. Like, what does that even mean? You could say that about email or Hangouts or anything. So I'd like to think a little bit more about what you can do with a group and what you get with a group. So what you get with a group, you get an email address and you get a web page. And what we can do with those things, with the email address, we can do an email mailing list, which is, I think, of what most people think of when they think of Google Groups. And you can do Google Apps permissions management. With the web page, you can make a discussion forum, a Q&A forum, or a collaborative inbox. We'll talk about all those way at the end because we're mostly going to be focusing on the stuff you can do with the email address today. And that's because it's the most common things that people are doing here at NC State. All that web page stuff is definitely much lower usage. So we're going to be focusing on emailing lists and Google Apps permissions management. So let's talk about the anatomy of a Google Group email address here at NC State. So you've got group dash at the beginning of every group. That shows that it's a group, a Google group, and not just an individual account or a generic account. That is automatically added. So all groups here at NC State have group dash at the beginning. You have your group name. Apps Collab is my sandbox group, the one that I test on and work with. So you'll see that name in other places today. That is chosen when your group is created. And at ncsu.edu shows that it works like an email address. How do you access Google Groups? There are two ways. You can type in groups.google.com in your web browser, or you can use the icon from the Apps Launcher or Google Grid. If you don't see it, you might have to click more at the bottom there if it's not one that you commonly use. Now let's move on to some general groups information. So these things are things that will apply to your group no matter how you are using it. So first, requesting a group. We do have a request process at NC State for groups. You have to kind of fill out an application for it. So a few things to prepare your request, think about before you get in and start requesting. You'll need to identify administrative and technical contacts. And those are just the people who will be responsible for answering any questions or managing your group, and also handling the renewal process, which the groups are renewed annually. You'll just get an email that says, do you want to renew this group? And you need to have somebody who's responsible for saying, yes, renew it. You'll also need to have a group name. The group names must be 5 characters or more and descriptive and accurate. So what we mean by descriptive and accurate is it saying what it is? Is it misrepresenting things? If you're not an OIT, you probably shouldn't have a group with the name OIT in it, that sort of thing. Descriptive, my team is probably not a good group name because whose team is it? Apps Collab is sort of a weird name, but it's Google Apps Collaboration Testing. So that's why it's there, and that is perfectly acceptable. And remember that it will have group dash in front of the name that you select. You must also give a reason for your group, the description of its use. So when I filled it out for Apps Collab, I said this is going to be a testing account for Google Apps training and Google Groups training. That's fine. If I'm in a team, this is for team communications. Fine. And expect about a week for your group to be approved, because that is a manual process in OIT. And I want to mention that groups membership is NC State only by default here. And the reason for that is permissions management, which we'll talk about later. But essentially, it'd be too easy to give external people access to internal things here at NC State if groups were all open to everybody. We will make exceptions for that. They can be requested after your group has been created. So if you want a group and you already know that you want external members, still go through that regular group request process, which I'll get to in just a second, and then send a help ticket to help@ncsu.edu and say that you need external membership for your group and why. Then those members will only have group access for email and web forums and not for the permission management stuff that we'll talk about in a little bit. So here's the request process. webregistry.ncsu.edu, and go through the request process, which I have in screenshots as we go through. So this is after we've logged into Web Registry. Click Start a New Request. Then select your service type. Choose Google Group. And we see the page has changed. It's going to give you all the same information that I just gave you about what you need to prepare for your request. Request a new Google Group. And then fill out this form here. And it's asking you for all the things that we just talked about. There is a second page that I don't have screenshotted on here that shows service contacts. I didn't screenshot that because it's really just entering the Unity ID of the administrative and technical contacts who will be responsible for the group. Pretty straightforward. And then you just continue on to the confirmation, and you'll get an email when it has been approved. All right, so we're going to jump ahead. You have requested that group, it's been approved, and now you need to start using it. So how do you access your group management? We're going to get to Google Groups, so groups.google.com, or through the Google Grid or Apps Launcher. You're going to click on My Groups, and all the groups that you are a member of or a manager of will be listed. And for groups that you are a manager of, you'll see Manage Group under the group name. So I've got just a little screenshot video of showing how that works here. So groups.google.com, My Groups. You will see all the groups that you're a manager of. I am a manager of quite a few. The ones that say Manage Group underneath them are ones that you are managed of. Hit Manage Group, and you'll be on the Settings Management page. I've got a screenshot of that because we're going to be spending a lot of time with this side toolbar here. I've got it partially screenshotted in a lot of upcoming slides. So I wanted to give you a little context of where that is on the page and what that looks like. So membership management is the first thing that people are going to be doing with their new groups. You need to add people to your group. So how do we do that? You've got 3 ways to add members to your group. The first is to invite them, and that sends an opt-in email. I've got a screenshot here of what that opt-in email looks like. You're able to put in your message. I've got mine that says, join this test group, but you can put in whatever you want to. So they get an email, and then they are able to click the button at the bottom, accept this invitation. You can also direct add members. That adds them without allowing them to opt in. They're just automatically in your group because you put them there. Including a message is optional for NC State users. If you leave the message blank, they get no notification that they were added to your group. It's completely invisible to them that they were added to your group unless they go into look at my groups in groups.google.com like I just showed you in that video. So that's good and bad. If you are telling people in another way that you're adding them, or you're just doing it as sort of an administrative process, that's fine. Otherwise, you probably want to include a little bit of a message letting people know that you've done something, you've put them in a group. And you are limited to 25 additions at a time through the direct add. The last way to add people is through a join request. So if you have a quote unquote closed group, which I'll talk about in a second, people can request to join your group, and those requests come into the join request section where you can approve or deny them. So that closed group is done by limiting who can join your group. The default is that anyone in your organization can ask to join the group. And then if they ask to join, it would show up in that join requests. If you'd like to change that, you can do it at permissions in the sidebar, basic permissions. You've got a few options for anyone in the organization or only invited users. And that's really going to depend on your use case about what setting you want it to be on. Removing members. So if you need to remove people, you click on members and then all members and use the checkbox to remove people by clicking actions and remove from group. I will note it is possible to remove yourself. It is possible to remove everybody. It is possible to remove managers from your group. Ask me how I know. If you remove yourself from a group, you are no longer able to manage your group. So what I did, and what is incredibly easy to do, is I checked this highlight all box at the top, and I did exactly what my screenshot is. I highlighted all and I did actions remove from group. And as soon as I did that, I was kicked out because I was removed from the group and I couldn't add myself back, or I couldn't add anybody back. So I had to contact the help desk because they're kind of the super administrators. I had to contact the help desk to get them to add me back as a manager. You will get no warning. There's no pop-up message that you're going to delete yourself or delete a manager. So just be very careful when you do that. It's not the end of the world if you have to contact the help desk. They didn't laugh at me. And if they're going to laugh at anybody, they should laugh at me for doing that. But they didn't laugh at me. They're very nice and they got me added back very quickly. But warning, be careful. If you need to change your member type, we're going to talk about our member roles in just a second. But if you need to change your member roles from a manager to a member, you can do so by highlighting your user and doing the remove from role or add to role. So we do have 3 default roles or permission types. The owner is always NC State, and that means that it is a Google administrator here at NC State and OIT. That makes them the super admin. That's why the help desk could get me back in to my group after I deleted myself. They can make all the settings changes, including deleting a group. So they're always the highest level of administration so that people don't do dumb things like I did and can't get back from it. The next type is manager, and they can make most group settings. That's the highest level of management administration ability that any of us are going to have. And generally, they can edit management and make settings changes. I have a little asterisk besides edit membership, because that can be changed in the settings. Member can generally make some individual settings changes that only apply to them, unless the manager gives them more privileges, like being able to approve membership, add new members, remove members, the what like. And I say there are 3 default roles because you can add as many different roles as you want to. If you're really excited about making different granular little changes, so you've got, student type of member and staff type of member, and they've got different permissions, you can do that. I'm not going to go more into that because that's kind of an edge case, but it is something you can do. So some common general group settings. Group names and descriptions. So I've got 2 examples here. Apps Collab, that is my sandbox one. That is the default name and description, where the name is just the group email address and there is no description, it's blank. And then I've got a nicer example here. It's nicer because Katie did it, with a custom name and description. So we've got a more descriptive group name, DEO Training Team, instead of the group name, and then a description of what the group is for. You can make those changes at Information, General Information, and you see where you just type in a new group name. You can't change your group email address here, which is a good thing. And then you can type in a group description. That's nice if you have a lot of different members, maybe from across campus, so that people will know what it is when they're being added to it and when they look it up. Probably not such a big deal if it's something like my group, the Apps Collab, that's just a sandbox, or something where all the people who are using it know what it is. Directory discovery. Do you want people to find your group when they're writing an email? So I have a screenshot here of composing a message. I've typed in group-C, just the letter C, and you can see all the group names that came up here. I'm not a member of any of those groups. I don't know if I would actually be able to email those groups, but they're showing up for me in Discovery. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? That's going to totally depend on your use case. For some groups, that might be great. Some groups, not so great. So you think about that, and you can make that change at Information Directory. And that's just a checkbox to list or not list that group in the directory. Now, I'll say listing it in the directory isn't the same as people being able to email it. You can have non-listed groups in the directory that people can email. Anyone can email. And listed groups that people can't email. Those are totally different settings. But do you just want it to show up when people are composing a message? Yes or no? That's all this does. All right. Moving on to our first use case for Google Groups. Permissions management. This is one of my favorite things about Google Groups. So you can use a Google group for permissions management by just swapping email addresses. So instead of sharing calendar invitations, files, Team Drive with a person, you can share it with a Google group. So I've got a little example of that here. So I'm sharing a file on the left. Instead of typing a Unity ID, I've got Apps Collab, and then we've got a picture on the right of a Team Drive, and you can see it shared with a group, OIT-neo.instructors. And you can see on the example on the Team Drive that it's shared with the group, and it looks exactly like it is shared with individuals. So all we did there, swapping out individual Unity for the group address. And I want to show you what that looks like in finding a free busy time in a calendar invitation. So I've got a calendar invitation where we normally invite guests. Instead of typing in a Unity ID, I'm going to type in a group. And I could send an invitation just like that. You see it's got a 9 next to it. That's the number of members. But if I look at find a time, I can easily see the free busy time for everyone in that group all at once, all those 9 people, without having to type in their email addresses individually. Pretty neat. So why would you use those Google Groups for permissions? First, there's that ease of use, just like with that calendar invitation. I'm not typing in 9 people's email addresses. I'm typing in 1. And then dynamic updating is the real huge benefit here. So membership changes automatically update Team Drive and Calendar. So if I go into, let's say I've got a file shared with a Google group, I go into groups.google.com and I remove a member from that group, then that file automatically removes access from that one person who was removed. Works the same way if you add a person. If I'm sharing a file or a calendar invitation with a group and not an individual, I update the membership at groups.google.com. Everything gets changed to reflect that membership update automatically in one place. It's awesome. So you've got a quick scenario here. You've got a committee, a department, a group that has calendar appointments that are recurring. You've got shared files or a Team Drive, and your membership changes like ever. It's really not a frequency thing. It's not that you've got people coming and going. Your membership changes ever. Then using a Google group will mean that you've got one place to do those membership updates at groups.google.com. You don't have to remember every file and track down every calendar appointment. You've just got one place to make an update. And all those permissions changes will cascade down. And then your users on the user side only have to remember the group name. I know I'm in some committees where there's like 20 people in the group. I don't remember everybody if I'm writing an email. How am I going to remember 20 people? I've really only got to remember one address. Super easy. So we're going to transition now to using a group for mailing lists. So a few mailing list basics. First, that it is transparent that's sent to a group and you can't see the recipient. So I've got a screenshot here of an email that was I sent to group-apps-collab. You can see that it's sent to the group. You can't see who all the members of the group are. So that's got some pros and cons too. It's sort of like sending as a BCC, a blind carbon copy. It keeps a little bit private who's in the group. On the flip side, if you do want to know, you won't see it right there in your email. Also, if you're familiar with the old listserv way of dealing with email lists, you would get a copy of mail that you sent to the group. You don't get that with Google Groups. But if you are worried that you sent an email and you didn't get a copy of it, you can always check in your sent mail in Gmail and the message will be there. So it will send, you just won't get a copy yourself. And some administration settings. Moderation. Do you want members to be able to email the group? Do you want non-members to be able to email the group? You've got those options under Settings, Moderation. So we've got two little check boxes here. Moderate all messages or moderate messages from non-members. If it's moderate all messages, then no one can email without moderation. And if it's moderate from non-members, then regular members can email freely. And just if there's a non-member who tries to send, it'll go into moderation. Here is some more settings for moderation. And I feel like when we look at this screenshot, it becomes a little clearer as to why I've decided to do this as screenshots as opposed to a live demo, because there are so many settings when we go in here. Everything is so granular for things that you want to turn on or off. So I'm really just pulling out these highlights here. Anyway, moderation. Who can approve a moderated message? The default is that only managers can, but you can change that. And that would be under approve messages. And that's under permissions, moderation permissions. So it's a different place. Turning on moderation is in a different place from who can actually approve and moderate your messages. Subject lines, group name prefix. This is a way to let users know that the email went to a group and not just them. So in this example, SysNews is the name of the group that it went to. And it's got a little pre-pinned SysNews on the subject line. You can do this at Settings, Email Options, and Subject Prefix. You can type in what you want there. In the example that it gives you, and then the SysNews example it gave you, those are both the group names. You don't have to use the group name. You can put in any kind of descriptive name that you want to. You probably don't want it to be super long because it is going to be at the beginning of all your subject lines. You just want enough that people know what group you're sending it to. Next, footer information. So this is a little sort of like an email signature that's at the bottom of messages that are sent to your group. You have options for including subscription and unsubscription information, but a good question to ask yourself is, does your message need to be CAN-SPAM Act compliant? So the CAN-SPAM Act is for messages, commercial emails sent. So commercial being selling of goods and services. Generally doesn't apply to a lot that we're doing here at NC State, but it does apply to some things. So, are you selling tickets for an event? Then it would need to be CAN-SPAM Act compliant. I'm not going to go more into what you need for CAN-SPAM Act compliance because I'm not an expert. But I will say that that may mean that you will need to send a custom footer and add a physical email address. So let's look at the email footer options here on this page. So we've got a few things checked because I wanted to show you what they look like. Display how to post by this group to email, display how to unsubscribe, display the URL. those are the 3 lines that are showing here. They all are in order for what's checked. And then we've got our custom footer where you could add in more information if you wanted to. So again, just think about your use cases and how some of these settings apply to things that you want to be doing with Google Groups. Next, post replies. So where do you want replies to go? So you've got these emails that are being sent back. If somebody hits reply, what do you want to happen? You've got a lot of options. The default behavior is what's called user decides, which I feel like is not very clear what that means. But what it means is good. Actually, like this default is that if you hit reply, it only goes to the author of the original message. If you hit reply all, then it sends to the entire group. You do have other options. I think that's a pretty good default. I think it's one that is very intuitive to people, that they understand what that means when they're going to be doing it. Some of these other ones, people might not understand why the behavior is not what they expect it to be. Particularly this one, custom address. So, for example, I could send to a group, but then have anybody replies, have it sent to help@ncsu.edu. So any of the replies would automatically get routed to the help desk instead of me, who actually sent the message to the group. That would be a very unexpected behavior for anybody who's replying. But again, think of your use cases. It might be something you want to do. So I just want to show you what that looks like in the settings. Again, the default is users decide where their replies are sent, and I think that's a pretty good one. Archive options. Do you want your messages to be saved and viewable on the web? So we're going to get into this more later, but we talked about how some of the things you can do with a Google group, that you get that web page and you can do Q&A forums and discussion forums. Archive options do need to be on for that, but why I'm including it with the mailing list settings is it is necessary for digest emails. So there are some settings that you can do. So if a group is really, really active and there's like 20 messages in this group every day, some people might want to get an email digest where they just get once a day, hear all the messages that went through. And to use that, you need to have archive options on. You can find that information content control, and it's just a checkbox for archive options. And I want to be clear that if this message is not on, you're still getting email archiving inside Gmail. They're just not saved in the website version of your group. Okay, so changing gears a little bit to the settings that people have as mailing list users. So even if you're not a manager of a group, some options that you have for customizing your mailing list options. So if you, as a manager of a group, get some questions, or if you want to make some changes to groups that you are already a member of. So on your main groups page, under My Groups, you can use a drop-down next to the name to set up for mail frequency. So I've got the drop-down showing here, every new message is the frequency, but I could get that combined updates to digest, or daily summaries, or don't get any emails. I can also unsubscribe as a user in a few different ways. I can leave this group on that same main page, or if the manager has included the unsubscribe options in a footer, I could click that and unsubscribe from a group. Okay, so next, using a group for discussion groups and forums. So we've got that web page for Q&A, discussion forum, and collaborative inbox. So Google likes to talk about these as 3 different types of Google groups, but they're really not different types of Google groups. They're a different implementation of the same Google Groups website. So all of these things are available through different settings changes in that sidebar settings. And this is very confusing. They've got all those different little permission types and different little granular settings. You can make any of those changes and get to a Q&A forum or a collaborative inbox. But if you'd like one of these after I talk about them, and you want a preset done for you that kind of chooses the options that Google thinks are best for that different quote-unquote type, like a Q&A forum, contact the help desk and they can change your group type to one of those presets. That is one of the very few things that you are not able to do at the management level. That has to be that group owner, super admin level. So how to access your Google Groups webpage. Again, visit that groups.google.com or click on Groups from the Apps Launcher. When you click on the name of your group, you may or may not see a whole bunch of messages. That inclusion of the messages will depend if that web archiving that I talked about a little bit earlier is on. So I've got a screenshot here of a group that I'm in that does have web archiving on. So we can see these different posts. Now these posts are all emails that were sent, but with web archiving turned on, they're turned into discussion posts on this website. Most of the groups that I'm in do not have web archiving on. So when I click on the name, they're just blank. There's nothing there. And that means that all of the discussions have been in email without web archiving on. So two things need to be on for anything to show up there. You need web archiving, and that just shows any emails that are coming in, like I said. And then posting options need to be on for the Q&A or discussion forum. So people need to be able to write a message on the website. So you turn that on. General information posting options allow people to post on the web as opposed to just post via email. So I want to give you a little example of a discussion forum. This is the G Suite Help Forum. They are using Google Groups to power this. So we've got different discussion forums here. I'm just going to click on one to show it. So we've got a discussion post that was made. This is post to the web. And then we've got discussion replies here. We have the ability to +1, so upvote things, and reply. I'm just going to click on add a reply here so you can see I could type in a discussion reply. So this looks very different from what we think about with email lists, but it's really pretty much the same thing, just showing in a different way. So this post here is basically an email that was sent to the group. And these replies are all basically emails too. They're just showing up on the web page. Now I hesitate a little bit to give that example because of the G Suite forum because it looks really nice. The reality is that this is what discussion forums look like in our environment. You can see I'm writing to myself, replying to myself. It's very basic. It is not beautiful. So Google, being Google, is using Google Groups to power their help forum, but they've made it beautiful. They've done a lot of custom settings in look and feel. So it's the same functionality, but a totally custom exterior. I'm going to say that discussion forums using Google Groups were really a great option like 10 years ago, but they haven't done a lot to this look and feel and functionality since then. Google Groups has kind of been languishing a little bit. It needs a little bit of love on the interface. So I feel like people have moved on past Google Groups. It was awesome a while ago. Now, not so exciting to use. A Q&A forum takes the discussion group that we were just looking at and changes the post type from a discussion to a question. And when you change to a question, you can give a best answer and you can assign questions. So I've got a little screenshot here too. I know it's not great, but it's the best one that I could find here. So people can do a me too, so you can kind of upvote on a question. Yes, I also have this question. And you have the ability to answer, to mark a best answer. And this is a nice thing if you've got people who are writing in questions and then you have kind of only staff answering things, or a group of dedicated people who are answering things. The discussion forum is a lot of like back and forth. This is I'm just answering. We can mark as best answer, and that kind of closes the question. A neat thing that I'm not going to go real deep into here, I'm just going to talk about it a little bit about question and answer, is that you can make topics and categories and assign those to people. So if we have a Q&A about Google apps, and somebody writes in a question about Google Groups, I can make a category of Google Groups and assign all of the categories with Google Groups to me. Or I can make a category of Google Sheets and assign all of the questions that come in that have the category of Google Sheets to Katie. And that way we can kind of keep track of our like subject areas by using these categories for questions. And lastly, we have a collaborative inbox system. And I don't have an example of a collaborative inbox for you to see today, which is, I'm a little disappointed that I don't have one, but it's really weird. So essentially, it's a really convoluted ticketing system. So if you're familiar with any kind of service tickets like ServiceNow or Jira or the old Remedy system, you get essentially an email that comes in, and then people are able to share access to this email and then take it, get it assigned to them, and then answer the question. So you can do this with Google Groups and a collaborative inbox, but basically it's a Q&A system. It's a Q&A forum like we just looked at, but people email the group email address, and instead of going to an email box, it makes a web post. And then a manager or a member of the group responds to the web post. The web post is sent as an email back to the user. So it's just a kind of slight different flavor on the Q&A system and the discussion group, but it's all closed. So members can't really see what they're so the users can't really see what they're doing, like on the back website, and they're just looking at it through email, and they're getting everything through email as the end user, the question asker, and the answerers are looking at everything through this web system so that they can do that taking and assigning of questions. So I could say that I'm going to answer this question, I take it, no one else, double replies to this email address or email question. It's a very weird system. I think we've got a lot better options here at NC State for ticketing or shared email accounts like generic accounts than this collaborative inbox. But since it is one of the Google, quote unquote, types of Google Groups, we should talk about it just a little bit, but it's super weird. So I talked a lot faster than I expected to. I was thinking I was going to leave 15 minutes for questions and discussion, but here we are, a little bit early. So I'm going to pop over to Katie and see if people are asking questions in the Q&A document.
Hi, Louise. We do have a quick question.
All right.
Someone is asking for clarification regarding a statement you made about how Google hasn't really changed the Google Groups interface in about 10 years, and that some people are moving on from using Google Groups. Did you mean moving on to other tools, or just kind of stopped using Groups because it's been stagnant?
A little bit of both. So, and I want to clarify that I mean moved on from using it in terms of the web interface, so that Q&A and discussion group section. They haven't really moved on from it from permissions management or email lists inside of Google. When I was looking for examples of Q&A, I was looking for a good collaborative inbox or Q&A example that I could share during this presentation, and just about everything is old. Like, people haven't posted on these Q&A forums in several years. So they're just gone a little stagnant, and the users aren't returning to these forums. I think mostly because people have moved on to other places. If you can set up a subreddit instead of having this clunky Google group, that's the sort of thing that people are doing. The Google Group Helps forum is still very active, and I think some of that is because they have made it prettier and looks more modern and up to date, and also because it's Google. If that's where Google is going to answer your question, that's where you're going to go.
Very good. We do have one more question coming in. Let's see.
Keep typing.
I know. It is regarding the collaborative inbox option. So
keep typing.
I know. Weird. Here it goes. There it goes. When a question is posted, do all members of the group see that question, or is it just the receiving group? Maybe the question there is, do all of the members of the group see the question, or is it just the manager?
So it would depend a little bit on how you have it set up. I think the default would be that anyone can email or post to the group. And then, so you would only have your actual members be the people who would be responsible for answering those questions. So it wouldn't be like, I guess, your normal group where all the people that you want to be part of the conversation are members. You would just have a much smaller membership of people who are just answering, so that other askers would not be getting emails or posts that other people are sending. Does that make sense?
It does to me.
Okay.
Yes.
Does that make sense, question writer?
Yes, they are saying that they got it and they will look into the settings. There is another question that just came in about the benefits of using Google Groups with team drives. And so I'm happy to help answer
Katie
that question
wants to talk
too.
about it. Katie is our team drive expert, and she knows everything about groups that I do. So go for it, Katie.
All right. So Louise did mention kind of the efficiency of using Google Groups when sharing files and sharing content through Google Drive. That comes into membership within team drives as well. So what we typically suggest when people are creating team drives and determining who the members and what roles those members are going to have in that team drive is to set up groups. And you can, if you have a large membership base for your team drive, but you only want 10 of those members to be managers and 10 of those people to be viewers, you can set up groups based on the roles that you want those individuals to have. And so again, instead of having to go into, every single file, every single, group or team drive that you have, you can just go straight into the group membership settings and update your membership there. And so if you have someone who's going to be a viewer for that group, or for that team drive, excuse me, you can update the users from the group interface, the group settings interface. But yeah, it gets really complicated when you have multiple team drives and multiple members who are, hold various roles or permissions. And so this way you can go straight into the group, you can make your updates there, and everything will populate not only in your team drive and the abilities they have there, but also throughout Calendar. And then when you email folks. That was a very complicated answer, I feel like.
I want to add one little thing to that, Katie.
Yes.
And say that, so with Team Drive, you can have in your membership, have a person kind of in two different places. And I think this is totally what you're getting at with managing at the groups level. But let's say that I invite a group to my team drive, and I have them just as viewers, but I also want one person in that group to be a manager. I could, if I've got a large group, do what you're talking about, make a separate group. I can also add that person to my team drive as a person and change them to a manager, and then they're also in the team drive as part of that group as a viewer. And those things do work okay together. But if you're doing that, this is why I want to bring it up. If you're doing that, you'll have to make sure you remember that you did that, so that if you remove them from the group, you still have to go back into the team drive and remove them as an individual.
Very good. Yes. Thank you for adding that. That is possible. A lot of people don't realize that you can have the same person in the team drive membership as a group and as a separate individual with different permissions.
It's a weird thing.
It is.
I wanted to bring it up.
It is, definitely. So I think for some reason, team drive information is really difficult to explain. It seems a lot more complicated when you're explaining it, but in reality, when you put it in to use, it's a lot more simplified, I feel like,
Agreed.
too. Kind of
I
like
love
two-factor.
Like a lot of Google things.
A lot of Google things, that's true. All right, any other questions?
We're still early, so more time for
Still
questions.
plenty of
Type
time.
things in. Okay, I'm going to move on to my last slide. So if you're still typing, you've still got time. So stay connected with us. I want to point out a few different things here. At the very end, we've got our evaluation link. Again, we really do look at those. This is the first time that we've done a Google Groups YouTube Live. So strongly encourage you guys to fill out that evaluation. You can talk about if I covered the things you wanted me to talk about, if it's too long, too short, etc. If you'd like the format online or if you'd prefer it in person. You can follow us on Google Plus and Twitter to keep up with the latest Google releases and get some of these quick tips like we were just giving with Team Drive. Our training calendar is available at go.ncsu.edu/learnit. And if you want a custom training, you can email the classreg@ncsu.edu. Ooh, lost track of what I was saying there. classreg@ncsu.edu is our email address for requesting a custom training. If you would like us to come to you and do a training on a Google app, we can do that. Just send an email to that address and we will get back in touch with you. So any other questions that have come in while I was talking, Katie? Or we will.
There was, but I was able to answer it. Oh,
excellent.
Wait a minute. Oh, hold up. Here comes another.
All right. I'm not rushing you guys. I promise. I just have to fill time talking.
Oh, that might be a suggestion for additional Google training opportunities. So that's great.
Okay. All right. Well, then we'll just end a little early. I rarely hear complaints about ending early, so hopefully you guys aren't disappointed. Get a few minutes of your life back. But thank you so much for joining us for this webinar. We're always happy to answer some of these questions and connect with you guys. And we hope we see you at a future training.
Wonderful. Thanks, Louise.